much, Marshall, for inviting me to Madras. My home village is close by. So though I don't visit my village, I like coming to Madras because I get a feeling that I'm returning, coming back home. Professor Nadkarni spoke about the world in transition. And here in this chart, you can see the world in transition. The world in 30 years from now is going to be a very different place. This transition is rather rapid. In 2009, the United States was the world's biggest economy with $14 trillion GDP measured in PPP terms. China was number 2, Japan number 3, India number 4. And then you had Germany, Russia, UK, and this is all in PPP terms. Then you move on to 2050, the rankings suddenly change, but the size of the GDPs changed rapidly. China has $59 trillion. India has $43 trillion. United States has $37 trillion. Rest after that are sub-tens, I call them, all countries below $10 trillion. So it'll be a tripolar world which is emerging. The top 3 are in a different league by themselves. Though, in per capita terms, China and India will be way behind the United States. Power of a government rests in, one in the GDP, and second is in the tax revenues it collects. So obviously, if it means you have a higher GDP, if your tax rates are good and your tax collection is good, then you have power also. Power to do things inside and power to do things outside. So there's this power transition which is coming, and a new bunch of fast-growing nations are emerging. Vietnam will be the fastest growing in the world. India follows, Nigeria, China. You see at the dropping off of the present giants. You see Britain will only be growing at 2.3%. Japan may not be growing at all, might even start receding. In terms of population, the world is also going to change very rapidly. China has reached the peak of its population and is now on a descending mode. China's population will reduce by about 20% by 2050. Europe will reduce by 25%. Russia will reduce by 40%. The only 2 countries in the world which will be growing at that time is the United States, which has a young population, and there are a lot of migrants. It has very good systems of selecting good migrants from other countries, and India. So if you are a young population, if you're a growing population, actually it means your economy is also going to go faster, and you will be at a different level every year. So this is the transition the world is going to go through. And we are, probably people at my age are witnessing the beginning of this growth. And many of you will be at the fagging end of this period. But this is a very interesting period for geoeconomics and geopolitics. The world rapidly changing this way. Now, this is how the center of gravity is shifting. Center of gravity shifting from back to the east. When the world economies began to be measured and began to be understood in the year 500 Christian era, also at that time, the Indian Ocean region was the world's greatest economic trading zone. All foreign trade took place between China and in the countries in the Middle East. And these Chinese sailboats, China was always a great exporter. Chinese sailboats would stop in the port of Cochin to wait for the winds to change and catch the next favorable monsoon to take it to the Middle East, then come back and stop again in Cochin, where they taught us how to make fishing nets and do various other things, and then proceed on with the trade. India started following on this path, and Indian ships also, merchantmen, began running between Cochin and South India to the west, to the East Indies and towards China. Indian boats also went to China. So this was a trading zone. And you can see the center of gravity shifting again. By 2050, Asia will be bigger than the West combined. Now that is how big this change is going to be. Now, who is driving this change? It's a very paradoxical situation we are living in. It's the United States which drives global change and global growth. The United States is the world's biggest importer. Not only is it the biggest importer, but it's also the term I use called the trade deficitor. The United States posts about $1 trillion of trade deficit every year. It's on the $1 trillion China, India, all are predicated our growth on. If the United States does not post a trade deficit, then we are all pretty much sunk. Where do we get our money from? 60% of the world's reserves are held in American dollars. 93% of world trade is conducted in dollar-designated terms. Now, even with China, the Chinese will say in yuan, but we actually buy in dollars. We ask them, will you take rupees for yuan? They say, no, give us dollars. Everybody wants dollars. So I use this phrase always that in the dollar bill, you got this sign which says, in God we trust. The rest of the world trusts in God and dollar we trust, So the dollar is king. And as long as dollar is king, I don't think China or anybody is in a position to challenge the United States. That is the reality. The United States dominance on the world is built on a fundamental anomaly and a fundamental flaw, that we don't balance our trade. And it came out of a decision in 1941 at Bretton Woods, when the New World Order was being planned. The United States said, we will not link our money to anybody else. Lord Keynes suggested a global currency called Bancor, that we all trade with each other in Bancor. But the United States, no, trade in dollar. And since then, the dominance of the dollar from 41 has continued and will continue to likely foreseeable future. I ask Indians who say, no, we can't allow the Americans to dominate the world. I said, do you want to hold your money in Chinese yuan or in Russian rubles? Where would you like to keep your money? And if you look at the world's reserves, 70%, or 60 to 70% of the reserves are always in dollars. The next biggest reserve currency is euro. That is pretty much because Europeans are quite incestuous. They trade among themselves in euros. Nobody outside the Eurozone really wants euros. So the dollar we trust, and dollar is king. And Americans, since they are the only ones who can print dollars, they can print as many as they want. In this COVID period, they printed $20 billion. No, 20? Almost $1 trillion. 20% of GDP. Because they print. They have 5 printing presses in America, incidentally, not one. Most countries do with 1 printing press. United States has 5 because they're constantly churning out dollars and we are grabbing the dollars. Imagine you're living in an island where only one fellow is printing currency. Everybody else is working hard to get that fellow's currency. And you put it back with him. And what he does is he lends it to his own people. They buy houses, they buy cars, they're all having a good time on borrowed money. Average American household is in debt to about 60% of its annual income. That's the kind of debt they carry. Houses on debt, car on debt, washing machine on debt. Even credit card, they're eating dinner on debt. Credit card debt alone is $57 trillion in America. So, America is the land of credit. It's our money, their credit. And they are eating and living. And we seem quite happy with this arrangement. Because, the United States is the aspirational nation in the world. We all want to be United States. Our children are going there. So I often joke and say it's the land of our children. Because, our children are going there. And so, as long as that is the situation, I don't think China or anybody is in a position to challenge the United States. But the United States got a mentality. It needs a challenge. Because 7% of the US GDP is the defense economy. And the US has been a wartime economy since 1940. It needs military production to be economically well off. And as long as military production is going, technology is improving, it needs crises in the world. When I was studying with Professor Joseph Nye at Harvard in the 70s, and we were talking about a post-Soviet Union era. So I asked him, theoretically, post-Soviet Union era would mean an era of great peace. He said, no, 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 no. We will find something wrong with the Russians or the Chinese or you, because that is the nature of the United States. We need a challenge. We need somebody to keep. So the United States, which has developed China, China owes its growth to the United States. United States annually contributes China in terms of a trade deficit. Last year was $354 billion. So in 3 years, they gave them $1 trillion. Please take it, become rich, make more ships, threaten us, and we will give more business to Lockheed Martin, whoever, and we will prosper. So this is how the world system goes. So I have no illusions about it, that these power transitions are only going to be notional as long as the United States currency is trusted, and as long as young people want to go to the United States, as long as innovation takes place in the United States, everything will be American-centric. America could have a lower GDP than India, but America will call the shots for a long time, maybe till the end of the century. We don't know. The transition is not happening now. It's not happening in 2050, maybe 2500 maybe. Next, please. So, United States contributes everybody. China, 451 billion last year. Mexico, this is the kind of trade deficits they have. And as long as Americans are posting deficits, as long as they mismanage their economy, because any other part of the world, if you post deficits like that, you're mismanaging the economy. And the IMF will tell you, please don't mismanage your economy. But as long as the US is mismanaging, we are all happy. This is the zone we're talking about, the Asia-Pacific. It's very interesting. It started off as the Asia-Pacific. The Americans coined the name. Americans like to give designations and names to all regions to suit their predilections. They first started with APEC and said Asia-Pacific Economic. Then suddenly Obama said, no, 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 I don't like Asia-Pacific. It's got to be Indo-Pacific. That is, India is now part of our world. So Obama, for some reason, was very impressed with India. He thought India had a great education system. That's because he never came to India till he became president. But he said India is his role. But they were looking at balancing China. By then they had invested so much money in China that China was beginning to worry them. So they wanted to invest on India, but find Indians are very difficult people. They don't really accept gifts easily. They're always suspicious. They're always questioning, querulous, challenging everything, argumentative about everything, So India says, even today, China is biting at the top of the Himalayas. India says strategic autonomy. We won't let your ships come here. We won't let you do so many things which you want us to do. The best ally for the United States is one who buys arms from them. No question. If you buy arms, then you're their ally. So their best ally is Saudi Arabia. Buys everything, all the rubbish the Americans make, Saudis buy it. So India is more choosy, wants to know what it's buying. And then, we have lobbies. We have the pro-China lobby, we have a pro-Indian lobby, we have a pro-American lobby, and our lobbies are warring. So it's very difficult to do anything excessively. But I noticed one thing. When Australia's deal with France was being broken up by the Americans, they offered them nuclear-powered submarines to make up for what the French were offering. 10 years ago, I was a part of a team from India which went to America. And we went to the State Department and they said, what do you want? So I piped up and said, we want nuclear attack submarines. Because we had our first Russian attack submarine, and we said, why don't you give us that? They were saying that you're pro-Russian, so you're... No, I said, you can give it to us on the same terms. You can give it to us on lease. And probably has a better chance of not ending up at the bottom of the ocean if you're so worried about that, We take your submarines. But they said, no, we can't trust you with nuclear technologies. But they can trust Australia. Australia, there are more people on trains in India than the whole continent of Australia. But they can trust them because, they are white, Anglo-Saxon, color of the skin, all that matters. So there are different tiers of US alliances. And India comes somewhere at a lower tier. But the reality of the world is this: China, America trade, India there, the three big powers are there, and the trade is there. So this Pacific zone becomes very important. And this is the US division of the zone through PACOM. PACOM's world is very different. When I went to Hawaii for the first time, met people at PACOM, they had a different world view. It's all focused on China, Japan, Korea, now India, but stops very conveniently. Karachi becomes Central Command. So they don't want to talk about Central Command. Now, who is contributing how much to world growth? Now, this is very important. China contributes 1/4 of world GDP growth. Still, that is the reality. United States 12.8%, European Union 10%, India 9.9%. But Indian contribution to world growth is growing. It's somewhere around 13% now. That was 2019. So, therefore, the European Union's contributions keep decreasing. By 2050, it'll be a nice place for tourists to go and, have expensive food, and nothing to buy from those guys. Look at the world allocation of reserves. Now, United States reserves are almost 70%. World reserves in US currencies are 70%. It's interesting. India has got $610 billion in reserves. You know how much US has? $60 billion. Because, they have the press. They don't need to keep reserves. So the US is the king here. As long as that is there, we trust the dollar, it'll be a US-dominated world. The Chinese realize that, and they periodically suggest currency swaps. They've even offered India from time to time yuan-rupee swap. But we don't fully trust the Chinese. What little game they're up to next, we don't know. Not all Chinese. Your Taiwanese people we trust. Now this is the foreign exchange reserves. China still has $3 trillion. Now people keep talking about BRI as China's big initiative to change the world. BRI is one of the most cleverest ways of converting reserves into debt. If you got reserves in American currency, you get 0.1% or 0.4% as interest. Or sometimes you have to pay the Americans money to keep your money. It's true. So what you do is you give it to Pakistan at 6%. You give it to Sri Lanka at 6%. Kazakhstan, And you also, Malaysia, they found out that Najib, they had bribed them almost $700 billion. So you bribe the rulers, you bribe the kings, and you say, take my debt. And what the debt has done. Once I was doing an analysis of CPEC for some Pakistanis in Lahore, and they asked me, I said, the cement for the road is going to be bought from China. They can get cheaper cement from us, cheaper steel from us next door, because most of steel cost is transportation, but they're going to get everything from China. hydroelectric plants are coming from China, everything is coming from China, and 90% of the capital deployed will be from China. And so he said, and the trucks will run from Xinjiang. I don't know what they're producing in Xinjiang. We have been to Xinjiang, all you see is desert. And to Karachi. Chinese trucks will be running. So what will we get? I said, when the Chinese trucks have punctures, you can fix the punctures, and you can sell the drivers tea and samosa. That's all you will get in terms of value addition. But you will pay the debt. The debt is yours. Sri Lankans have learned that the hard way, because when I saw Hambantota airport, they were drying paddy on the airfield, on the runway. So that's what, and Sri Lanka has to pay for it. Now this is the historical US trade deficit. It's an old American habit to live beyond your means. That is the American dream, So you go to America, get a credit card, go to your banker, borrow money, buy a house, keep borrowing money, and keep rotating your debt. And every American, I see all my relatives who come back from America, they got about 24 credit cards. They're pulling this one, pulling that one out. There's credit all over. The guy's driving a big car. And so anyway, so that is because of the trade deficit. You keep piling on deficits, and we keep eating that deficit, and we're living off the deficit. So it's a very unnatural world we're living in. But that's how the world is going to be. Imbalanced trade with the world, with everybody. The only 4 countries in the world where the US has a trade surplus. I think one is Vanuatu, one is something, countries like that, But the rest, everybody, they spend more money than they have. And we love it. Now, the trade volume of goods between the US, ASEAN was 28 billion. China's exports to ASEAN were 483 billion, and ASEAN's trade to China was 394 billion. So even with ASEAN, there was a time when ASEAN was posting surpluses with China, because ASEAN goods were being converted, going to China, getting converted, and going to America. Now it's the other way around. China is using ASEAN as a pass-through. ASEAN has become China's largest trading partner for the 2nd consecutive year. Now this is what should cause us concern, because we don't get a bite of ASEAN's trade. Now, I'll come to the final phase of that how long will the China miracle continue? The Chinese miracle depends on its demography. Now, the dependency ratio of 64 is rising from 41 to 64. That means China will have too many old people by 2050 and not enough young people in the workforce. It's only young people who, is the people who are working age cohort who actually produce, save, consume. As economists like me, people below the age of 18 have no interest because they are a burden. People above the age of 65 have no interest because they're a burden. Because you're not earning anymore, you're not spending anymore, and you've got your money in the bank. At the age of, I turned 75 2 days ago, I would not be thinking of buying a new car. 2 years ago, I suggested to my wife, let's get a new car. This new Skoda had come, superb. And she said, but how long will you use it? So we don't buy. And we keep money in the bank. She says, she's computing all the time. The liver will cost 25 lakhs, kidney will cost 40 lakhs, So keep money in the bank. So to an economist, you're of no use, So China's people are all going to, 64% are dependent on 36%. And that is China's problem. The GDP growth rates will start coming down. Whatever it does is going to be the position of the new Japan. Japan, whatever it does now, it will not grow because the biggest population cohort in Japan are women above the age of 80. Now, young people also don't want to go to Japan. Because, we like to go to America. Why? Because there are a lot of young people there. You're not going to go to Japan, which is full of old people. And old people don't buy anyway. So, China's dependency ratio is adverse, and Dr. Nadkarni can sleep peace. He's not going to challenge America for very long. He'll be going downwards. And when it's going downwards, you can say hello to it. But America would like to keep pushing China up all the time, saying that's a threat because Martin Marietta wants it, Lockheed wants it. India's dependency ratio is pretty good. 51% will be young. We're pushing the economy, and only 49% dependent. So that is why there's an optimism about India in the world, because the dependency ratios are good. And we don't listen to our government. Our government has been trying to bring family planning here for many years, decades. It's only last year we reached 2.1, which is the balanced growth. And now we're beginning to get worried, because in the south, we've reached negative growth. Now, Mateshwaran and me are constantly worried about people from UP and Bihar coming here. So they have other problems. But India will keep growing. It'll keep growing for longer than China will be growing. So the Americans are trying to become very friendly with us now. And I keep telling my Indian strategists, then they will do to India what they did to China. So don't get too close to them. Keep your distance. Thank you very much.